A poem by an anonymous author. Freedom. To all our soldiers, past and present, God bless. Glory to the American flag. Long may she wave. So many have been covered with her when they've gone to their grave. So many of us have taken for granted that our freedom will always be. We tend to forget those who have kept that right for you and for me. A soldier will stand and fight all night to keep us from harm, while some of us sit at home and refuse to lift an arm. Some sit around and complain all day how wrong this war must be, while a soldier pushes that aside to continue to fight for you and me. Some sit around and complain about the food they're going to eat, while a soldier works straight through, hungry and weary on his feet. While you sit around and complain about what you have or where you live, remember what a soldier somewhere for you is about to give. A soldier stands tall and proud and ready for the fight. We must stand strong behind them through their hard and arduous plight.
I went in when I was 17, went to the Naval Academy when I was 17, so I spent almost 30-some years in. I mainly had a wonderful time. It was very good for me being with a group of people, all of them heading in the same direction.
Well, I had the distinct honor of serving in the American military for over 30 years as a United States Marine. Genesis of that experience was quite accidental.
I was commissioned as second lieutenant in the United States Army upon graduation from college. I went to the Army Aviation Officer Initial Entry Rotary Wing course, where I earned my wings to fly helicopters, and I was in the Army for 6 years.
I served our country as a naval aviator for 30 years and retired as a commander.
I became active duty in 1968 after I graduated from nurses training. We had some recruiters all come and they were talking about it, and it sounded like a fun adventure. Little did I know what kind of adventure I was getting into.
And I had been in the Army Reserve, the enlisted Army Reserve, for 4 years during college till I graduated. So I graduated with a BA in education and went to work teaching in the public schools in New Haven. But very briefly, because I knew I was going to be drafted. So I applied for Navy OCS, so I was accepted for Officer Candidate School.
I joined the Navy because I signed up to go, I got accepted to the Naval Academy, and that's where you go when you graduate from the Naval Academy.
I joined the Navy Nurse Corps right out of nursing school. I went to St. Joseph's Hospital School of Nursing in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I was recruited right out of nursing school. And it wasn't a very popular time to join the Navy. It was 1972. The Vietnam War was raging, but I wanted to serve my country, and I wanted to use the skills that I had learned in nursing school to help take care of the servicemen and women.
Throughout 30 years, I served in aviation logistics, and I had the true privilege of serving among a very diverse, culturally diverse group of men and women, and collaboratively led thousands in this mission of supporting marine aviation. Throughout 1/3 of my career, I served on Navy staffs because we were budgetarily tied to the Navy with the aviation budget. So I just have a treasure of very fond relationships that have really defined me. Throughout the 30 years I served, as an adult And that was the first 30 years of my life. And I think what I awakened to when I went to that experience at OCS, an Officers Candidate School, was I was really challenged to reach deep down inside and discover what I was made of. That appealed to me. It brought something out that I knew was there, but really had not been pushed or had been pushing myself to discover on my own. And then once I accepted the commission and began serving, I was really awakened to the American military ethos. We don't serve a particular king or a regime or piece of land. We're probably the only militia on the face of the earth that has not served a particular king or regime or piece of land. Instead, we serve in defense of an ideology, namely freedom. So when you stop and think about it, our mission, is to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States based upon the discretion of the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. That inspired me, and it still gives me chills to this day. So my experience, can be summarized as having been, quite accidental. I ended up, doing something that I never foresaw myself doing. Never thought I would do it for 30 years. But at each turn, I found myself being rewarded by these relationships, being rewarded by the realization of what I was part of was something much bigger than myself, and very gratifying.
One of the things that my grandkids love is talking about my time on aircraft carriers, especially when we were picked up astronauts. It was something that you don't get to do every day. In the Navy, you don't get to do it. But the Navy was there to do it. They picked up a lot of astronauts. In fact, most of those things came down in the ocean, and they had aircraft carriers and whatnot to pick them up. So those were all very pleasurable things. Meeting the astronauts were always glad to come down and talk to the engineers, because they were basically engineering people, And after they got locked down, their lockdown was sort of like ours. They would be in their time locked up for maybe 3 or 4 days, and then they were given clearance, and they would roam around the ships talking to people, signing autographs. All my time was in the Pacific, and a lot of it was crossing the ocean. That's a big ocean. I crossed 3 times at 8 knots, at 8 miles an hour on minesweepers. That's really dull, really terrible. But then I was on destroyers. I spent a lot of time in Vietnam on the coast on destroyers, and 1 year on a Vietnamese ship. I was an advisor to the Vietnamese Navy and was running up and down their rivers on this gunship. I think all our young people should spend some time out of the country. They would appreciate what they have a little bit more, huh? Because you see some really tough things in the world, and you see some good things. I remember when John Kennedy was assassinated, I was on a ship in Hong Kong, and we left the ship. We were all just sad. People from Hong Kong would come up and tell us how sad they were about the whole thing. It really made you realize that our country was looked up to in a special way as a beacon, as a beacon, and they shared in our sadness in these things. I think we tarnished that somewhat in Vietnam and maybe more recently, but it was there. It's always there, and it was always part of why I stayed around.
One of my most memorable duty stations, and I never thought that this was going to happen. I got a call, I was over at Balboa, and this was 1993, the end of 93. The executive officer came into my office and said, "We have a mission. All of us are assigned to a operational billet, they call it. So either to go out on a ship, to go deploy somewhere, and I was on what they called a fleet hospital, which is similar to a MASH unit in the Army. And so he came into my office, he said, "We have a mission. We're going, but you can't tell anybody." and we're going to Zagreb, Croatia. So this was 1994. This was during the Bosnian War. And so in March of 1994, we flew over to Zagreb, Croatia, and we were set up in the hangar at Zagreb at the airport. And we had part of our hospital in there, part of it was outside. We lived in tents, and I was there for 6 months, along with all of my colleagues over there. And we were there under the United Nations. We wore the blue beret, which I think was the first time the Navy Nurse Corps had worn the blue beret and been under a command like that. But we were there for a peacekeeping mission, and we took care of 40,000 troops from 40 different nations. It was just incredible. If somebody had said to me, you're in the Navy, 10 years ago, if they had said, before that, you're in the Navy and you're going to be going to Zagreb, Croatia, I would have said, I don't think so. I don't think that's in the cards. But it turned out it was an incredible experience in many different ways.
Our first duty station was in Chelsea Naval Hospital, which is in Boston, and it was really a wonderful experience because as a new nurse, the Navy was willing to give us lots of opportunities to learn. It was once again during Vietnam War, so we were extremely busy, very, very busy. Like most places, short staff. And the Corps people were awesome. I mean, they really supported us. I came there and they decided that I should be an intensive care nurse because I knew how to draw blood and start IVs. Quite an experience because I had come thinking I would get to do pediatrics or OB or something fun in my ideas like that. But instead, I got to be an ICU, CCU nurse. And we also did recovery room. I mean, I was young. I was only 21. And we were taking care of 17-year-old, 18-year-old boys who had not even finished high school. And they came back with wounds like you can't believe. I mean, I remember sitting and relieving my break. I was in recovery room because I said we covered everything. And sitting and visiting with somebody who was coming back from surgery. And then, of course, we all helped. It didn't matter whether we were on our break or not. If vital signs needed to be taken, we were there. And I had gotten new shoes for the military, and they were hurting my feet. And so I was commenting about it. And then I got up to take the vital signs of this really nice man. We were just talking. And he was in there for revision of bilateral amputees of his feet. And I thought, how humble. I mean, it just made me realize what all they went through. And I was saying my shoes hurt me, and he had no feet. It was not an easy time. And I think that's true why you say people don't share those emotions, because we just put it in the back closet. And you go and deal with life, and hopefully we cherish the life we have and the life of those around us.
For extraordinary heroism while serving as Senior Enlisted Advisor, Trident 1125A, SEAL Team 1, in support of Operation Inherent Resolve, on 4 March 2016. Chief Petty Officer, then Petty Officer First Class, Keating's courageous leadership, tactical acumen, and physical courage were the key factors in defeating an assault on friendly lines by more than 100 enemy fighters. The citation concludes, his personal bravery throughout the engagement inspired his comrades to vigorously defend their position and repel the enemy's assault. By his decisive actions, bold initiative, and complete dedication to duty, Chief Petty Officer Keating reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service.
went on leave of absence from teaching, although I really didn't plan to return, and reported to OCS at Newport, Rhode Island. So I was one of the first of the 4-month wonders, was commissioned an ensign, and asked for a ship that was, I was single, of course, so asked for a ship that was deployed overseas. I wanted to see the world. And I got my wish. I got a destroyer that was currently deployed to the Mediterranean. So I was flown to Northern Africa and spent about 2 weeks trying to find the ship. In those days, movements were very classified, so I had to try and check in every day and see if they could tell me where the ship was going to be. So I ended up, spending a week touring Italy and Greece and having a great time until they finally caught up with me and said, "Your ship's in port, so get on board." And that was in Greece. And so that was a 2-year tour duty, and I liked it so much that when my 3-year obligation was up, I decided I wanted to stay in. And I had married meanwhile, and that was fine with Charlene. I said, I'm going to stay in the Navy. And she said, "I never expected you to do anything else." So she was a great service wife. She spent a lot more time raising the 3 children than I did, and was a great service mother. When I had command of Fox, right at the beginning, we were deploying to Westpac, Western Pacific as we called it, and we were heading for Subic Bay in the Philippines. And as we were, the night before we pulled into Subic Bay, you're threading your way through the Philippines, a strait called the San Bernardino Strait, which means me and the navigator is up all night, okay, because you're inside of land, and so you're constantly checking on the ship's position. And during that night, a message came in, this is before cell phones, that my eldest daughter, Robbie, was in a serious accident. She was kicked by a horse, not her horse, a very freakish accident. She was thrown, and then the horse came back and kicked her, very unusual, right on the peak of the chin. And she was in critical condition at the Navy hospital, and my presence was recommended by the commanding officer of the hospital. Well, I was in a ship that was deployed, and the radio man, when he saw the message, was terrified. He didn't know what to do. So he took the message to Captain Edney and said, "What'll I do?" And he said, "Well, you did the right thing, son. Captain Kelly can't do anything about it. We're at sea. So I will take care of this. I'll tell him when we get into port, because there's nothing to do about it till we do that. So you did right." So when I came down that morning, tired, needing a shave, looking for coffee, and there was Bud Edney sitting in my cabin, and his first words were, "Sit down, that's bad news." So I did, and he said, "Your daughter's been injured, seriously. She's in the hospital. She's hanging in there, and you need to get back there. And here, I'm tired. I've been up for 24 hours. I said, "I can't leave the ship." He said, "Of course you can. We'll be in port for a week. Your XO is a qualified person, isn't he?" And I said, "Yeah, but I can't leave the ship. I just can't." He says, "Of course you can." He says, "Now I've got a reservation all ready for you. Continental Airlines out of Manila, via Hawaii into San Diego, and go back, put your arms around your daughter, tell her you love her, and try and get back here before we get underway in 8 days." And I can remember vaguely, walking back to the helicopter, and I didn't sleep for 4 days, and I learned what it's like to be awake for 4 days. So I don't remember much of the flight, but I remember leaving the airport and getting into a taxi and going directly to the hospital, and Charlene met me there. And Robbie had already had her first operation, and she was out of the woods, thank God. And I spent a day and a night with her and said, "I've got to get back to the ship," and she understood. And we hugged, we kissed. I knew she was going to make it. She had like 3 more surgeries. You can't even tell anymore. She had her face reconstructed, and she lost hearing in one ear, went right back to riding horses. In fact, won a couple of blue ribbons at Del Mar after that. That was probably my worst week, but it turned out well, and Robbie's fine. And I got back to the ship in time.
I was on active duty for 8 years, from 1969 to 77. Wound up going to flight school down in Pensacola, and then from there I wound up in helicopters, and then wound up going to Vietnam. The Navy had one squadron, active duty squadron, actually based in country in South Vietnam. The Vietnam thing was a really good thing for me, because you do grow up a lot over there, and you figure out what's important and what isn't. You learn how to take care of people, and for me at that time in my life, that was something. I mean, it was good. It was a good experience. I'm glad that I went. I remember in the last month in Vietnam, I was thinking, everybody sort of gets the last month you're there. I think no matter what you're doing, whether you're in the Army in the trenches or whatever you're doing, you're thinking. I remember thinking, I'm just looking forward to going home and flying, and not having anybody shoot at me. I was there 11 months. It was the wind down phase of the war. I think it officially ended in '75. We all kind of remember that when everybody was evacuated. But the squadron that I was in, from 71 to 72, it was a lot more dangerous to be there in 67, 68, 69. By the time I got there, it was much less so. I went there because I felt there was a grand plan, and everything was being done for the right reasons, and you pretty much do what you're told, but that's part of the military way. I mean, the older I got, you realize, maybe not all the decisions were necessarily the best at the time, but I think people, for the most part, did the best they could. I think the big thing there is learning. You get in an environment where you learn straight away that your number one job is not to take care of you, but to take care of you. And you put other people first, and you spend a couple of years doing that. And then, now, you're ready to go out and join the world and behave in a manner that makes sense. And that's the best thing about time in the military, I think. And the sooner you learn that, the better off you are. Anyway, but just looking out for the other guy is the number one lesson. Putting somebody else first, taking care of your troops and then yourself.
My experience in Germany would be the most memorable because I was there for, I guess, a long period of time. And of significance there was I was flying the border on the day that they had announced that the East-West German border was coming down, and we hovered over the Autobahn there and just watched as far as we could see the cars coming from East Germany, people walking and pushing their cars, and so that was a historical day, of course. One of the things that was remarkable about it was looking into East Germany when we flew the border. It was like time had frozen. It was more like I was there in the 80s, and it looked more like the 40s or the 50s, the construction and everything. Of course, coming toward our side, that was something that we welcomed and would protect people who tried to cross coming to the west. I didn't ever know of anyone trying to get to the eastern side, because you may not be able to come back. But one of the things that I want to say that I get emotional about is I feel like in some ways my service in the military was my country's gift to me. To have the opportunity to learn, leadership and management skills, and to learn to fly an aircraft and be, in charge with that responsibility. And in some ways, it was just a dream of a lifetime, and just an incredible gift. And it is representative of our nation's values, respect for freedom and individual rights, and pride in our country, and our desire for other people to have what we have and experience that.
I'd like to share one very important experience in my life. In the beginning of 1962, the Soviet Union was testing the commitment of the United States to the defense of Europe by closing access to Berlin, to all the other powers. And so my carrier, the World War II Wasp, was sent to Europe to demonstrate our commitment as Americans. And I ended up going on the Wasp, this aircraft carrier, up around 20 miles up the Rhine River and anchored in one of the cities there. We ended up going into Oslo, Norway, at the height of the Communist Youth Festival, and sent our 3,000 sailors ashore right at that point. I was the 25-year-old Navy helicopter pilot, and searching for the submarines one night, the Soviet submarines, about 100 miles south of Iceland, on a cold and very dark, foggy night, when somehow the tail section of my helicopter caught on fire, and my co-pilot turned to me and said in a panic, "We're on fire, we're on fire," and he kept looking back at the tail. So I had to do a controlled ditching into this dark, cold ocean 100 miles south of Iceland. My helicopter, as soon as we hit the water, rolled over upside down, and the nose where we were sitting went down underwater upside down. And I and my co-pilot and my sonar operator all found ourselves in that condition, upside down in this cold water in the middle of a dark and foggy night. But we all managed to get out and swim to the surface. And each one of us got into a small life raft that we had it was just a one-man life raft, and it would sit under your arm as you flew. I remember on that time that I did not expect to survive very long in that cold water. And I remember praying to accept whatever God had planned for me and asked Him to care for my new wife and my mother. And after a period of time, as the cold began to seriously affect me, I saw all of a sudden, way out in the distance, just a little light. It's in the fog, barely visible. And then it came toward me and got bigger and bigger and brighter and brighter. As it did that, I remembered the line from the gospel, "I am the light of the world." And I honestly felt like God was coming through the fog to rescue me. And then as it got closer and closer, I saw a destroyer emerge out of the fog. And that was his masthead light. And he came closer and he picked us up, rescued my crewmen, my co-pilot, and me. My prayer was answered. I was able to return to my new wife and my widowed mother. And ever since, I have never forgotten those words of Jesus, "I am the light of the world." And that memory is especially strong when I hear the music performed by you, my dear. The music that I no doubt are probably hearing at this same time that we're giving you our talk. So in closing, I have one thing to say. May God bless each one of you as much as He has blessed me. And may you live in powerful connection to Him. Amen.
Well, I am extremely privileged to be a bassist, within the Sacred Heart Classical Choir, going on 7 years now. So you're looking at a guy that, only previously sang in the shower, okay? Never classically trained, cannot read music to this day. But with the direction of Elena and some great leadership from Elizabeth, Steve Kelly, and other section leads that you brought in, I've really learned to blend and to kind of fill out the sound in a coherent way, and it's very gratifying. So for me, this very small choir produces such a mighty sound, a magical sound under Elena's direction. And I find that the reason it's gratifying for me is because, at our core, we're all emotional creatures. And music, translates this emotion in a way that words do not, that sight does not. There's something about that lift you feel in every piece that we sing. So whether it be, from Bach to Rachmaninoff, I have sang or sung in German, in Russian, in Latin and English.
I have an aunt who was an opera singer. In fact, she was a very good friend of Spreckles, Sidney Spreckles, the daughter of Spreckles. They used to travel around Europe together, going to opera houses and singing. And so she would try and get me to sing on the piano when I was a little kid. I never could do that. I was sort of gun shy, I think, of that. But I like music. I grew up liking jazz and liking sea chanties. Oh, me father was the keeper of the Eddystone Light, and he slept with a mermaid one fine night. From this union there came three, a porpoise and a porgy, and the other was me. Yo ho ho, the wind blows three, oh, for a life on the rollin' sea. One fine night when I was trimmin' the glyn and singin' a verse from the evening hymn, a voice from a boy come out of the night. What has become of my children three? Me mother then she asked of me. One was exhibited as a talking fish, the other was served as a seafood dish. Yo ho ho, the wind blows three, oh, for a life on the rolling sea. The phosphorus flashed in her seaweed hair. I looked again and me mother wasn't there. But then came a voice from out the night, to hell with the keeper of the Eddystone Light. Yo ho ho, the wind blows free, oh, for a life on the rolling sea. There.
Well, I've always loved music and opera. My brother, had a big collection of classical music, so I had an early liking for it. In college, I was in the mixed choir, the madrigal group, the a cappella group. Even on the ship, we in the Fox, I had a former choir director as one of my officers, and we had a Protestant chaplain on board. The choir director said, could we form a little musical group, maybe a quartet or a double quartet? I said, sure. And he said, would you be in? I said, sure, be happy to. We'll do that, operations permitting. So we would sing at religious services, and usually we had about 8 or 10, a double quartet or something like that, sometimes just 4. For 20 years, I was on the St. Rose of Lima choir. I was also a cantor most of that time. We had 4 cantors, and we'd rotate. We'd each do a month at a time. So I wasn't terribly good, but that was a great experience. And then, of course, when we moved here, I came to see Holly and said, I'd like to sing in the choir if you'll have me. And so I was here for 22 years.
I was in the choir, in the Catholic choir at the Naval Academy. And that meant you had to get up earlier than everybody else to go rehearse. And then we were the first, I think Mass was 8 o'clock, so you really had to get there early and on top of that, you rehearsed one night a week. But other than that, I mean, it was something I signed up for, and some guys never made it past row, row, row your boat. I made it past that, and then step number 2, he was good enough. He said, and that's where I say it about myself, but he said it to me first. He said, okay, John, I think you're good enough to do no harm here. He said, so if you want to join the choir you're in, you'll be in the bass section. I said, great. I'm a bass, or as Elena would call me, a basso profundo.
I have no musical talent, but I could not say enough about how important that I believe music is. To worship, for one thing, I just feel like, music gives expression to common emotions and things that we, as humans, something that we experience and feel, but really can't necessarily put words to adequately. And music, sometimes music alone, or music and lyrics, of course, really contribute to that.
I have been an active member of Sacred Heart Parish since I was a small child, and I joined the first choir when I was probably 3rd grade. And so singing and choir has been very much part of my being. I think we're very fortunate to live in a military town where we are able to still feel the presence of the importance of our being in the service and part of the service.
I can't remember a time without music, whether it be, I mean, even from a jukebox, you know, to a phonograph. And I joined choir at a fairly young age, and when I was in high school, I joined the chorus, and I sang in the diocesan chorus in York, Pennsylvania. And it's just become sort of part of my life. When the folk music started coming around is when I actually first started playing guitar. And so that was sort of my in with that. I was taught, pretty much self-taught, and had some help from some others. But I've continued to sing in choirs and continued to play guitar. Of course, been a member of Sacred Heart's choir since the early 80s. And so just continue to enjoy music.
The entire experience of serving has been characterized as one of gratitude. You know, I really think that defines me. It's all about being part of this democracy. It's all about having this responsibility to serve. You know, freedom without responsibility is debauchery. And what we have today, you know, is the product of so many that have gone before us. Throughout our family's history, we've had someone serve in the American military from the very first skirmish, you know, until today. That's something that you can really stand back and reflect on and realize, boy, there's been an awful lot of sacrifice that's brought us to this point in time. And you know, nothing's perfect, nothing ever will be perfect. And it's up to us, each and every day, each and every person in their own way, you know, to be part of this democracy and to serve in different capacities, different ways, but to serve.
Over here.